I was closing a multi-million-dollar deal when my family destroyed my life with a single text message. My tablet screen lit up during the final handshake with the Henderson Group, their CEO still gripping my hand as I glanced down. The family group chat notification glowed against the polished mahogany of my Manhattan office desk. Augusta, we think it's best if you step back for now. The words hung there like a death sentence. Cold and clinical. Below it, Aunt Carol's thumbs up emoji appeared. Then Uncle Patrick's. Then my father's. 13 years. 13 years of sacrifice. Of writing checks. Of being the family's personal ATM. And this was my reward. But before I tell you what I did next, if you're enjoying this story of how I took down my own family's criminal empire, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will shock you. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this ends. Let me take you back to where it all started. 3 years before that text message changed everything. The Thorne family estate sprawled across 5 acres of prime Connecticut waterfront, a monument to old money and older secrets. My grandfather, Thomas Thorne, had built his fortune in commercial real estate, transforming rundown properties into gleaming office complexes across the Northeast. By the time I graduated from Wharton with my MBA in finance, the Thorne name meant something in business circles. It meant power, influence, and most importantly, money. I remember the day grandfather called the family meeting. It was a crisp October afternoon, the kind where the leaves turn gold and the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. We gathered in his study, a room that always smelled of leather and expensive cigars. My father Charles sat stiffly in the wingback chair. His jaw set in that way, that meant he was calculating something. Uncle Patrick sprawled on the couch with false casualness, but I caught the gleam in his eye. My mother Eleanor perched on the ottoman, her hands folded perfectly in her lap. My younger sister Jenna fidgeted beside me. Bored with family business as always, grandfather stood by the massive stone fireplace, his silver hair catching the firelight. He was 83 then, still sharp as a tack, despite the tremor in his hands. I have decided to establish the Thorne Family Support Fund, he announced, his voice carrying that authority that comes from building an empire from nothing. $2 million to start, for family members who hit rough patches, medical emergencies, educational needs. We take care of our own. He looked directly at me when he said the next part. Augusta, you've made quite a name for yourself at Westridge Capital. Your bonus alone last year was more than most families see in a decade. I'd like you to be the primary contributor, 40%. The rest will come from your father's company and other family businesses. I should have seen it then. That flicker of resentment in my father's eyes. Should have noticed how Uncle Patrick's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. But I was young and stupid and so desperate to prove I belonged in this family of titans. Of course, grandfather, I said. Whatever the family needs. My cousin Gareth, fresh out of accounting school and eager to prove himself useful, was appointed fund manager. He had a boyish face that inspired trust and a way of explaining financial statements that made everyone nod along. I'll take excellent care of this. Aunt Dorothy, he promised our grandmother, kissing her papery cheek. You can count on me. The first year passed smoothly. Grandmother's heart medication. Paid for. Uncle Henry's daughter's college tuition. Covered. Cousin Marie's small business loan. Approved. I wrote my checks quarterly, sometimes more when needed, and felt that warm glow of being useful, of being valued. My bonuses at Westridge kept climbing as I closed bigger deals. Attracted bigger clients. I was good at what I did. Maybe too good. And I poured 40% of everything I earned into that fund without question. The quarterly family dinners became ritual. We'd gather at my parents' lake house, a sprawling modern construction of glass and timber that my father had built 5 years earlier. My mother would cook her famous prime rib. Aunt Nancy would bring her apple pie that everyone raved about. And we'd sit around the massive dining table overlooking the water while Gareth presented his reports on colorful pie charts and graphs. The fund is performing beautifully, he'd say, clicking through slides on his laptop. Despite market volatility, we've maintained a steady growth rate of 7% annually. Administrative fees remain minimal. We're helping 12 family members currently. I started noticing the discrepancies about 18 months ago. Nothing major at first. Just small things that didn't quite add up. Administrative fees that seemed to creep higher each quarter. Vendor payments to companies I'd never heard of. But I trusted Gareth. I trusted my father. I trusted that blood meant something. The dinner where everything started to crack open was in April, 2 years after the fund's creation. Spring had come early that year, and the lake sparkled with late afternoon sun as I arrived at my parents' house. The smell of roasting meat greeted me at the door. Along with the sound of my father's booming laugh from the living room, I'd had a particularly good quarter at Westridge, closing the Meridian Tower deal that had been stalled for 18 months. My boss Stephanie had called it the impossible deal, but I'd made it happen. I was riding high, feeling invincible. When I took my seat at the dinner table and opened the quarterly report Gareth had emailed that morning, $25,000 in administrative fees this quarter, I said, not accusingly, just curious. That seems high for a family-managed fund. What exactly does that cover? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. My father set down his wineglass with a careful precision that should have warned me. Uncle Patrick and Gareth exchanged a glance across the table. My mother suddenly became very interested in adjusting the napkins, its necessary operational costs. Augusta, my father said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he used when he thought I was being difficult. Running a fund isn't free. There are filing fees, tax preparation, account maintenance, investment advisory services. But we're not using external advisors, I pointed out. My finance brain automatically running calculations. Gareth manages everything in-house, and filing fees shouldn't run more than a few thousand annually. Where's the other 20,000 going? Are you questioning your cousin's integrity? Uncle Patrick cut in, his face reddening. After all the work he's done for this family, I'm not questioning anyone's integrity, I said carefully, feeling the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on me. I'm just asking for clarity. I contribute 40% of this fund. I think I'm entitled to understand where the money goes. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. Augusta. Not at a family dinner, but we never did discuss it privately. My father avoided my calls for 2 weeks, then finally responded with a terse email saying everything was in order and I should trust the family. Uncle Patrick stopped inviting me to the summer barbecues. Gareth's reports became vaguer, with fewer line items and more summary paragraphs. I should have pushed harder. Should have demanded a full audit then? But I was busy at work, and part of me didn't want to be the troublemaker, the outsider who didn't trust family. So I let it slide, even as that voice in the back of my head whispered that something was very, very wrong. 6 months later, I hired Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was a forensic accountant, recommended by a colleague at Westridge who'd used her services during a messy divorce. She was in her 50s, with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed nothing. Her office in Midtown was small but immaculate, every surface organized with military precision. I need you to follow the money, I told her, sliding a folder across her desk containing every bank statement, transaction record, and report I'd saved from the Thorne Family Fund. Something doesn't add up, and I need to know what I'm dealing with. She opened the folder, her expression neutral as she flipped through pages. How much are we talking about here? The fund started with $2 million. I've contributed another one. $6 million over 3 years. Current balance should be around $4 million, give or take. Accounting for distributions and investment returns, her eyebrow raised slightly. Should be, is showing as $2 million in the last quarterly report. She made a note on her legal pad. I'll need access to the actual bank accounts. I can't get that without alerting them that I'm investigating. Then I'll work with what we have. Give me 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks felt like 2 years. I threw myself into work, closing deals with a manic energy that had Stephanie calling me into her office to ask if everything was okay at home. I smiled and lied and said everything was perfect. At night, I'd lie awake in my Chelsea apartment, staring at the ceiling and running numbers in my head, trying to find an innocent explanation for what I'd seen. Eleanor called on a Tuesday morning. Can you come to my office today? I found something. I canceled my afternoon meetings and took a cab to Midtown, my heart hammering the entire ride. Eleanor's expression when she opened her office door told me everything I needed to know before she even opened her mouth. "Cite down," she said. And I knew it was bad. She laid out the evidence methodically, like a prosecutor building a case. The administrative fees weren't fees at all. They were payments to shell companies that existed only on paper. The vendor invoices were fabricated. The services never rendered. Money was being siphoned out of the fund in a dozen different ways, all carefully disguised to look legitimate. "How much?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "At least 800,000 over 3 years. Probably more. But they've been clever about hiding it." My hands felt numb. "Who?" "Your cousin Gareth is the obvious culprit. He has direct access. But," and she paused, choosing her words carefully, "some of these transactions required secondary authorization. The fund's bylaws require 2 signatures for anything over $10,000. My father, and your Uncle Patrick. I found their signatures on dozens of authorization forms. They knew. Augusta. They were part of it." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the arms of my chair, focusing on breathing. "Show me everything." She did. 2 hours of evidence. Of betrayal spelled out in transaction logs and forged documents. The worst part came at the end, when she pulled out a series of transfer authorizations bearing my signature, except I'd never signed them. I'd never even seen them. "They forged your signature on at least 30 documents," Eleanor said quietly. "You're on record authorizing transfers you never approved. If this comes to light, you could be implicated." I sat there in that small office, surrounded by evidence of my family's crimes, and felt something inside me break and then harden into steel. They weren't just stealing from the fund. They were setting me up to take the fall. "Thank you, Eleanor," I said, standing up. "Send me everything. Every document. Every transaction. Every piece of evidence. Encrypted email." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to get my money back." I spent that night reading through every page Eleanor had sent, making notes, building my own case. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Money from the fund was flowing into my father's construction company, Thorne Construction, which I discovered was on the verge of bankruptcy. He'd over-leveraged during the pandemic, taking out massive loans to expand just as commercial real estate collapsed. The banks had cut off his credit, so he'd turned to the family fund, to my money, to keep his company afloat. But even that wasn't enough. I found transfers to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, campaign contributions to local politicians that exceeded legal limits, a whole network of financial crimes sprawling out from that initial theft like a spider web. They'd stolen from family members in need to save my father's failing business and line their own pockets, and they'd made sure my name was on the paperwork so I'd go down with them if anyone came looking. The next family dinner was scheduled for the following Sunday. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to just walk away, cut my losses, write off the money, and the family both. But I kept thinking about grandmother Dorothy, who actually needed that heart medication, about cousin Tyler's kids, who were counting on that college fund, about all the people who'd trusted us to do right by them. I walked into my parents' house that Sunday with my tablet in my bag, loaded with every piece of evidence Eleanor had found. The weather had turned cold, and snow was starting to fall over the lake. Inside, everything looked perfect. The table set with my mother's best china, the prime rib roasting in the oven, the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. "Augusta," my mother said, kissing my cheek, "we're so glad you could make it. You've been so busy lately. Work's been intense," I said, accepting a glass of wine from my father. But I wouldn't miss family dinner. Gareth was already seated, setting up his laptop for the quarterly presentation. He gave me that boyish smile that probably worked on everyone else. "Hey Gus, ready for some good news? The fund's performance has been exceptional this quarter." I sat through dinner making small talk, smiling at jokes, complimenting my mother's cooking, all while feeling like I was wearing someone else's skin. Across the table, my father held court, telling stories about his latest construction project, the West Side development that he promised would turn everything around. Uncle Patrick laughed too loud at every joke. Aunt Nancy served pie. Jenna scrolled through her phone, oblivious to everything. When Gareth started his presentation, I watched my family's faces as he lied to them. Watched them nod along as he showed fabricated numbers and fictional growth rates. Watched my father's hand on Uncle Patrick's shoulder. A gesture of conspiracy I'd seen 1,000 times but never understood until now. I have some questions about the administrative fees, I said when Gareth finished. The room went still. But before we get into that, I need to tell you all something. I've hired an independent forensic accountant to audit the fund. The color drained from Gareth's face. My father's wine glass stopped halfway to his mouth. Uncle Patrick's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. You did what? My father said, his voice dangerously quiet. I hired an auditor. Because something wasn't adding up. And do you know what she found? I pulled out my tablet and started walking them through it. Every fabricated invoice, every shell company, every forged signature. I watched my family's expressions shift from shock to anger to panic as I laid out the evidence of their crimes. My mother started crying. Aunt Nancy put a hand over her mouth. Yenna looked confused, not understanding what was happening. Grandmother Dorothy sat very still in her chair, her eyes closed. Do you have any idea what you've done? My father said, standing up. Do you understand what you're accusing us of? I'm not accusing you of anything, I said calmly. I'm stating facts. You stole from the family fund. You forged my signature. You used money meant to help family members in need to prop up your failing business and enrich yourselves. Uncle Patrick stood too, his face purple with rage. You ungrateful little bitch. Everything we've done for this family. You've stolen almost $1 million. Your father was protecting family legacy. Uncle Patrick shouted. Thorn Construction employs 40 people. 40 families depend on that company. What were we supposed to do? Let them all lose their jobs? You were supposed to ask for help, honestly. Not steal from people who trusted you. My father moved around the table toward me. And for a moment, I thought he might actually hit me. You think you're so smart with your Wall Street job and your fancy education? You don't understand how the real world works. Sometimes you have to make hard choices, like forging your daughter's signature and setting her up to take the fall when your crimes are discovered. I said, because that's what you've done. My name is on documents authorizing illegal transactions. If anyone investigates this, I go to prison alongside you. That stopped him. The calculation in his eyes, weighing whether I was bluffing, whether I'd actually turn on family. Here's what's going to happen, I said. I'm withdrawing my money from the fund. All of it. And I'm reporting what I've found to the appropriate authorities. The room exploded. Everyone shouting at once. My father cursing. Uncle Patrick threatening. My mother begging me to think about the family. Jenna crying that I was destroying everything. Only Grandmother Dorothy stayed silent. When I looked at her, she nodded once. A tiny gesture that might have been approval or might have been goodbye. I left that house and drove straight back to the city. By the time I got home, my phone was lighting up with calls and texts. Threats. Please. My father promising to fix everything if I'd just be reasonable. Uncle Patrick's barely veiled intimidation. Gareth's panicked messages. I ignored them all and called my bank. The Thorne family fund had a clause buried in its bylaws that my grandfather and I had insisted on over my father's objections. Any withdrawal exceeding 30% of the fund's value would trigger an automatic comprehensive financial review by the custodian bank. It was meant to prevent exactly what had happened. Someone draining the fund and running. I'd contributed 40% of the fund's total value. I was withdrawing 40%. By the time the bank opened Monday morning, I'd already submitted the paperwork. By noon, the fund's accounts were frozen pending investigation. By 3 o'clock, my father had left 17 voicemails, his voice progressing from anger to desperation to something that sounded like fear. The final message said simply, "You have no idea what you've done to this family." He was wrong. I knew exactly what I'd done. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. The bank's investigation uncovered everything Eleanor had found and more. Within 48 hours, federal investigators were involved. Money laundering, tax evasion, wire fraud, identity theft. What had started as family drama became a federal case. My father showed up at my apartment 3 days later with my mother and Uncle Patrick. I'd upgraded my security after Eleanor's warnings. So I watched them through the door camera, debating whether to even let them in. My mother looked like she'd aged 10 years. My father's expensive suit couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "I'm surprised to see you after you told me to step back. We need to talk," my father said. "Privately. I think we're past privacy. But come in." They filed into my living room. That beautiful space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson that I'd worked so hard to afford. My father looked around like he was cataloging everything, putting a price on my success. Uncle Patrick went straight to my liquor cabinet without asking, pouring himself a scotch. My mother perched on the edge of my sofa, twisting a tissue in her hands. "What have you done?" my father said. "The bank has frozen everything. Federal agents came to the office. Do you understand what this means? I understand you've been committing crimes for 3 years using my money and my name. We were protecting the family business. By stealing from family members and forging documents," Uncle Patrick slammed his glass down. "Your father has obligations. The company employs people. Real people with families who depend on those paychecks. The pandemic nearly destroyed us. The banks wouldn't help. We had to keep going. So you decided to commit fraud. We borrowed from the fund," my father said. "We were always planning to pay it back. With money from the West Side development deal?" "Yes. And the offshore accounts," I said. "The shell companies. The campaign finance violations. The forged signatures. That was all just borrowing too." My mother made a small sound, something between a sob and a gasp. "Augusta, please, think about your sister. About your grandmother. If this goes to trial, the publicity will destroy everyone. Then you should have thought about that before you committed crimes," I said. My father took a step toward me. "You're going to regret this. Family doesn't turn on family." "But you did," I said. "You stole from me. You forged my signature. You set me up to take the fall, if anyone discovered what you'd done. You destroyed our family, not me. You ungrateful little bitch." Uncle Patrick snarled. "Everything you have because of this family. The Thorne name opened doors for you, and I walked through them on my own merit." I said, "I built my career. I earned my success. What did you build except a house of cards and a pile of lies? If you do this," my father said, his voice cold, "you'll be dead to this family. No one will speak to you. You'll be cut off from everything. I think I can live with that." They left, my mother crying, Uncle Patrick swearing. My father's parting look promised consequences I couldn't yet imagine. 2 hours later, my sister called. "Grandmother needs her heart medication." Jenna sobbed into the phone. "But the fund card was declined. The pharmacist says her account is frozen. Dad says it's because of you. How could you do this to Grandma?" The blow hit exactly where they'd aimed it. I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of guilt. "I'll take care of it. Give me the pharmacy number." I called and arranged for the medication to be delivered and billed directly to my personal credit card. Then I called 3 other family members I knew, depended on the fund for ongoing medical expenses, and set up the same arrangement. Whatever my father and uncle had done, I wouldn't let innocent people suffer. But Jenna wasn't satisfied. "You've always been jealous," she said, her voice bitter. "Jealous that Gareth was closer to the family. Jealous that Dad trusted him more than you. Now you're destroying everything because you couldn't be in charge. Is that what they told you?" "I have eyes. I can see what's happening. Can you?" I said. "Did they tell you about the $800? 000 they stole? About the forged documents? About the crimes they committed using my identity? You're lying. I have evidence. I have an independent audit. I don't believe you," Yenna said, and hung up. I sat in my apartment that night, watching the city lights blur through tears. I wouldn't let fall, and realized my father had done exactly what I'd expected. He was controlling the narrative, turning me into the villain, making sure that when the truth came out, the family would already be convinced I was the problem. The next morning, I went to see Grandmother Dorothy. She lived in a cottage on the estate, a smaller house my grandfather had built for her after he'd started forgetting things. She was 86 now, still sharp but fragile in the way of old bones and failing organs. "Herr Nurse lät mig in," eyeing me with suspicion that told me the family rumors had already reached her. Grandmother was in her sunroom, wrapped in a quilt despite the space heater, looking out at the winter garden. She smiled when she saw me, that warm smile that had always made me feel safe. "Augusta, I wondered if you'd come." I pulled up a chair beside her. "How are you feeling?" "Old. But that's not your concern. You want to know if I'm angry with you, are you?" She laughed, a dry sound like rustling paper. "Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said you had his head for numbers and his spine of steel. He worried about Charles. You know, your father." "Worried how?" She looked at me, her faded blue eyes still sharp. "Your grandfather had a gambling problem. Years of it. Before you were born. He lost so much money to some very dangerous people. Your father helped him, paid off the debts, made it go away. But it changed Charles. Made him feel entitled to things. Made him believe rules didn't apply to the Thorns." I felt something click into place. "The fund? You think Dad saw it as payment for saving grandfather?" "I think your father has always felt the world owed him something. And I think he taught your uncle and Gareth the same lesson." "There's something else," I said. "Something I need to tell you." She held up a hand. "I know what they've done. Not all of it. Perhaps, but enough. I'm old. Dear, not senile. I've been watching, listening." "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I hoped I was wrong. Hoped my son wasn't capable of what I suspected. But I wasn't wrong. Was I?" "No," I said quietly. "You weren't." She patted my hand with her papery fingers. "You did right. It will cost you, but you did right." When I got home that evening, my apartment door was ajar. I froze in the hallway, my instincts screaming danger. I pulled out my phone, ready to call 911. But then I saw the door wasn't damaged. Someone had used a key. I pushed it open slowly, stepping inside. My apartment had been tossed. Not violently, not destructively, but thoroughly. Drawers opened, papers scattered. My laptop was gone. The folder with Eleanor's documents had vanished from my safe, which meant someone had known the combination. The security camera footage showed Uncle Patrick letting himself in 4 hours earlier. He'd spent 20 minutes going through my things, taking what he wanted, and leaving. He'd had a key I'd never given him, which meant he'd had copies made somehow. Probably years ago, I called the police, filed a report for breaking and entering, theft, and unauthorized access. The responding officers took notes with the kind of skepticism that said they knew this was a family dispute and would rather be anywhere else. When I mentioned the family name, I saw recognition in their eyes. The Thorns, old money, the kind of people who didn't usually have police in their homes. The detective assigned to my case called 2 days later. "Ms. Thorne, I understand you're having some family difficulties. Are you sure you want to proceed with charges? My uncle broke into my home and stole my property. He says your father gave him a key years ago for emergencies. Says he was worried about you. Thought you might be in distress. He stole evidence of financial crimes. I filed a police report. I expect it to be investigated." There was a pause. "I'll see what I can do." After I hung up, I checked my credit report. Something Eleanor had advised. 3 new credit cards I'd never opened. All maxed out to their limits. Combined balance. 47美元000. All showing my name. My social security number. My signature. My father had stolen my identity. I sat there staring at the screen, and something inside me went utterly calm. The hurt. The betrayal. The desperate hope that somehow this was all a mistake. It all burned away in that moment. What remained was cold clarity. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about survival. I took screenshots of everything and sent them to Eleanor. Then I did something I'd been putting off. I called Sharon Davis, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. If my family was going to try to destroy me, I needed someone in my corner who understood how these battles were fought. Sharon's office was in a glass tower downtown, all steel and leather, and the kind of understated luxury that costs a fortune. She was in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back severe and eyes that had seen everything twice. "So," she said after I'd laid out everything, Your family has been running a multi-million-dollar fraud operation and setting you up as the fall guy. That's the situation. And I want to protect myself. And I want them to face consequences for what they've done. She leaned back in her chair. This is going to get ugly. When we move against them, they'll come at you with everything. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your career, your credibility. They'll paint you as a disturbed woman making false accusations against her loving family. They're already doing that. Then it's going to get worse. She pulled out a legal pad. Let's talk strategy. We spent 3 hours laying out the case. Evidence of fraud, proof of identity theft, documentation of the forged signatures, Eleanor's audit report, bank records, everything Eleanor and I had gathered, organized into a prosecutable case. I'll file emergency injunctions tomorrow to stop any further identity theft and fraudulent use of your name, Sharon said. Then we're going to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and the District Attorney's Office. What your family has done crosses state lines, involves offshore accounts, includes wire fraud and money laundering. This is federal. How long? 6 months to a year before trial, assuming they don't take a plea deal. She looked at me seriously. Are you ready for this? For what it's going to do to your family, your relationships, your life? They made this choice, but you're choosing to see it through. That's different. Then yes, I said. I'm ready. The next morning, Westridge Capital called an emergency meeting. I walked into the conference room to find my boss Stephanie, the head of legal Bernard, compliance officer Keith, and a representative from FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. The atmosphere was glacial. Augusta. Please sit, Stefania said, her voice carefully neutral. They laid it out efficiently. Anonymous complaints had been filed claiming I'd been involved in financial irregularities with a family investment fund. FINRA had received documents, transactions bearing my signature, authorizing transfers to entities under regulatory scrutiny. There were questions about potential conflicts of interest, undisclosed financial relationships, possible violations of securities regulations. These aren't my signatures, I said. I've already filed police reports for identity theft and forgery. My family has been committing fraud and using my identity without my knowledge or consent. Bernard exchanged glances with the FINRA rep. We understand this is a difficult situation, but until the investigation is complete, we have to protect the firm's reputation. What are you saying? You're being placed on administrative leave with pay while this is sorted out. You'll need to surrender your company devices and credentials. You cannot contact clients or represent yourself as a Westridge employee during this period. I felt the floor drop out from under me. You're suspending me based on anonymous accusations. We're following protocol, Keith said. If you're cleared, you'll be reinstated with no mark on your record. And if the investigation takes months, if my father succeeds in destroying my reputation, my career was over. And we both knew it. I turned in my laptop, my phone, my keycard. Walked out of the building I'd worked in for 8 years, past colleagues who wouldn't meet my eyes. By the time I reached the street, my personal phone was already lighting up with messages. Word traveled fast in the financial world. I went home to my apartment, to the space that no longer felt safe, and found my boyfriend Nate waiting. I'd given him a key 6 months ago, back when I thought I knew what trust meant. Hey, he said, pulling me into a hug. I heard what happened at work. I'm so sorry. I let myself lean into him for a moment, needing the comfort. It's a nightmare. My family is trying to destroy me. He pulled back, his expression troubled. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Is there any possibility you were involved? Maybe without realizing it. Sometimes people can be manipulated into— What? I said, stepping back. You think I'm involved? I'm just asking. Your family is saying you've been acting strange, making wild accusations, that you might be having some kind of breakdown. Something in his tone made me grab his phone off the counter before he could stop me. I swiped it unlocked, his face recognition doing the work, and opened his messages. The thread with my father went back months. Charles Dorn. Your daughter has been displaying concerning behavior, mood swings, paranoid accusations. We're worried about her mental health. Nate, I appreciate you keeping an eye on things. Augusta has always been high-strung. The pressure at work might be too much for her. She's talking about hiring investigators, making accusations of fraud. Does she have a history of delusional episodes? I scrolled through message after message. My father feeding Nate a narrative, Nate reporting back on my mental state, my activities, my plans, playing the concerned boyfriend while selling me out for. I checked the earlier messages. An investment opportunity in my father's West Side development project. Get out, I said. Augusta, I can explain. You've been spying on me for my father. You've been undermining me, feeding him information, helping him build a case that I'm mentally unstable. He wanted me to watch out for you. He wanted you to betray me. And you did. For money, for an investment in his failing company, you were using me the whole time. That's not fair. I care about you. Get out of my apartment. Now, this is my apartment, he said. And I realized with sickening clarity that was true. We'd moved in together 3 months ago. Into his place. The beautiful Chelsea loft was his. Then I'll leave, I said, already moving to the bedroom to pack. We're done. Nate, you're going to regret this. You're making a mistake. I've already made it. I trusted you. I threw clothes into a bag, grabbed my important documents from the safe Nate didn't know about, and walked out of that apartment into an early winter evening that felt like the end of everything. I checked into a hotel under a fake name. Not one of the luxury places where I might be recognized, but a decent mid-range chain where the desk clerk barely looked at my ID. I paid cash for a week and sat in that anonymous room staring at the walls, trying to figure out what came next. My phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Gus, said a familiar voice. It's Maddie. Madeline Torres. We'd been roommates freshman year at Wharton. Stayed friends through graduation. But life had pulled us in different directions. She'd gone into forensic accounting, taking on cases that combined her love of numbers with her passion for justice. How did you get this number? I asked. I'm a forensic accountant, she said. Finding people is literally part of my job. I heard through the grapevine what's happening. Someone trying to frame you for financial fraud. Family involved. That's my specialty. Gus. I want to help. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time in days. Why? Because you let me copy your macroeconomics notes for an entire semester when I was drowning. Because you're a good person who doesn't deserve this. And because I really hate it when families use money as a weapon. So what do you say? Want a partner in crime fighting? She showed up 3 hours later with 2 laptops, a portable scanner, and enough determination to move mountains. We set up a command center in my hotel room, spreading documents across both beds, creating timelines on the walls with sticky notes and string like something out of a detective movie. Madeline worked with a focus that bordered on obsession, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she traced money through layers of corporate structures. Look at this, she said on the 3rd day, spinning her laptop to show me a flowchart she'd built. The money doesn't just go to your father's construction company. It flows through 6 different shell companies first. Here, 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 and here, then splits 3 ways into personal accounts belonging to your father, your uncle, and Gareth. And these 3 other names I don't recognize, she nodded grimly. I'm still tracking them down, but I think they're business partners or maybe people your father owes money to. The point is, this is textbook money laundering. They're not even being subtle about it. What about the political contributions? She pulled up another screen. Those are even worse. Campaign finance laws limit individual contributions to $2 wit cents per candidate per election. Your father's companies have donated over $50. 000 to various candidates using money from the fund, routed through different entities to hide the source. That's illegal in about 10 different ways. Can we prove all of this? I can prove it well enough for a prosecutor to get a conviction. She looked at me seriously. Gus, your family is going to prison. You understand that, right? When this comes out, when the authorities see what I'm seeing, your father and uncle are looking at serious federal time. I know, and you're okay with that. I thought about my father's face as he'd threatened me. About Nate's betrayal. about the forged signatures and stolen identity, about every family member who'd chosen to believe the lies rather than ask me for the truth. They made their choices. I'm just making sure those choices have consequences. The anonymous email arrived the next morning. Subject line: Thorne Family Fund. More than you know. No sender name. Just a generic email address created that day. The message was brief. You're asking the right questions, but it goes deeper than family fraud. Check the attached files. Madeline ran the email through her security protocols before opening the attachments. Clean, she said. No malware. But someone really wants you to see this. The files were explosive. Documents linking the fund to a network of shell companies involved in money laundering operations far beyond what we'd discovered. Transfers to offshore accounts totaling millions. Connections to real estate deals that looked suspiciously like vehicles for cleaning dirty money. Political contributions that crossed the line into campaign finance fraud. Tax evasion on a systematic scale. This isn't just a family stealing from a fund. Madeline breathed. This is organized financial crime. Who sent you this? I have no idea. The answer came 2 hours later when my bank account was frozen. I discovered it when my hotel keycard stopped working. Went to the front desk to find out why, and learned my credit card had been declined. Tried another card. Declined. Pulled out my phone to check my banking app, and found all my accounts locked with a message to contact the bank immediately. The bank representative was apologetic but firm. We've received a court order freezing your accounts pending an investigation into allegations of financial fraud. I'm sorry, Ms. Thorne, but I can't give you access to your funds until this is resolved. How long? I don't have that information. I hung up and checked my credit score. It had dropped 200 points overnight. Someone had reported multiple fraudulent accounts in my name. Missed payments. Defaults. My financial life was being systematically destroyed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A single image. A document laying out a plan to make me the mastermind behind the Thorne family's financial crimes. My name at the top. My supposed motivations. A narrative of greed and betrayal. And at the bottom, my father's signature approving the strategy. They were going to pin everything on me. I showed Madeline. My hands shaking. They're burning me. Making me the scapegoat for all of it. She read the document, her face hardening. Then we go nuclear. Right now, today, we take everything we have to the FBI and the DA, and we bury them before they can bury you. I have $12,000 in cash in my safe deposit box. That's all I can access. Then we move fast. She was already packing her laptop. Sharon Davis. Your attorney. She has contacts in federal law enforcement. Right. Yes. Call her. Tell her we're coming in with everything. And Gus. She put a hand on my shoulder. After today, there's no going back. You're about to destroy your family. Are you absolutely certain? They destroyed themselves. I said, I'm just turning on the lights. Sharon made calls while Madeline and I organized our evidence. By evening, we had meetings scheduled with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit and an assistant district attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. We spent the night preparing, organizing our case into a narrative that would be impossible to ignore. The FBI field office was in Federal Plaza, a fortress of glass and concrete that felt appropriately imposing. Special Agent Rebecca Martinez met us in a conference room with walls covered in whiteboards and photographs of various financial criminals. She was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes that assessed and calculated everything. Walk me through it, she said. And we did. 3 hours of evidence. Documents. Bank records. Madeline's forensic analysis. Eleanor's audit. The forged signatures. The identity theft. The shell companies and offshore accounts. The political contributions and tax evasion. We laid out a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years, using a family fund as cover for money laundering and fraud. Agent Martinez took notes without expression, asking pointed questions that showed she knew exactly what she was looking at. When we finished, she sat back and looked at me. Ms. Thorne, you understand that several of these documents bear your signature. You're implicated in some of these transactions. Those signatures are forged. I have handwriting analysis that proves it, and I filed police reports weeks ago for identity theft. I'm aware. I pulled your reports when your attorney requested this meeting. She tapped her pen against her notepad. Your family is going to claim you're making false accusations because you were cut out of the business. That you're a disgruntled daughter seeking revenge. Let them claim it. I have evidence. You have evidence they committed crimes. You also have evidence that puts your name on criminal transactions. A good defense attorney will argue you were involved and only came forward when you got caught. Sharon leaned forward. Which is why we're here now. Before any charges are filed. My client is a victim of identity theft and financial fraud. She's cooperating fully with law enforcement. She's providing evidence of crimes that would never have been discovered otherwise. Agent Martinez nodded slowly. I'll need everything you have. Every document. Every recording. Every piece of evidence. And Ms. Thorne. She looked at me. I'll need you to wear a wire. The plan was simple in theory. Terrifying in execution. A family meeting where I'd confront my father and uncle, get them talking about their crimes, and let the FBI record every word. If we could get them to discuss the fraud openly, to talk about the shell companies and offshore accounts, it would seal the case. It's dangerous. Agent Martinez warned. Family confrontations can turn violent. If at any point you feel unsafe, use the code word, and we'll move in immediately. What's the code word? Red. Just work it naturally into conversation. I'm seeing red. This is a red line. Any variation? We'll be monitoring in real time. I spent 2 days preparing, practicing with Agent Martinez and Sharon, learning how to guide conversation without being obvious about it. The wire itself was surprisingly small, hidden in a button on my blouse. With a backup device in my watch, the meeting was scheduled for Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My father had sent the invitation by text, his message carefully worded. Augusta, we need to talk as a family. Clear the air. We all want what's best for the Thorne name. I knew it was a trap, that he planned to use the gathering to pressure me into backing down or to gather evidence for his own case against me. But it was also exactly what we needed. The drive to Connecticut felt endless. Agent Martinez and her team followed in an unmarked van, staying far enough back to avoid detection. Sharon had wanted to come, but we'd agreed it would raise too many questions. So it was just me, driving through an early winter evening toward the house where I'd grown up, about to betray everyone who shared my blood. The house blazed with lights, looking warm and welcoming from the outside. I knew better. I parked in the circular driveway between Uncle Patrick's Mercedes and Gareth's BMW, took 3 deep breaths, and walked to the door. My mother answered, her smile brittle. Augusta. Everyone's waiting. The dining room table was set for 12. My father at the head, Uncle Patrick to his right, Gareth beside him, looking nervous. Aunt Carol, Uncle Henry, my sister Jenna, several cousins I'd barely spoken to in years. A full audience for whatever performance my father had planned. Augusta, my father said, standing with false warmth. Thank you for coming. Please. Sit. I took the chair opposite him, hyper-aware of the wire against my skin, the weight of what I was about to do. Before we start, I need to know something. Are you willing to drop all this nonsense about fraud and theft? Can we put this family back together? That depends, my father said smoothly. Are you willing to admit you made a mistake? That your accusations were based on misunderstanding? There's no misunderstanding. I have evidence. Evidence. Uncle Patrick scoffed. You have paranoid delusions fed to you by some investigator you hired to justify your jealousy. I'm not jealous of anyone. No, my father said, his voice taking on an edge. You're just determined to destroy this family because you can't accept that the business needed the money more than the fund did. My heart jumped. Say that again. What do you mean? The business needed the money more. Thorne Construction was facing bankruptcy, he said, warming to his subject now, believing he was winning. We had payroll to meet, contractors to pay. Without that infusion of capital from the fund, 40 families would have lost their livelihoods. So you stole from the family fund to cover your business losses. We borrowed, temporarily, until the West Side development comes through. The West Side development that you've been funneling campaign contributions to politicians to approve, I said, using money from the fund, routing it through shell companies to hide the source. The room went very quiet. My father's expression shifted. calculation replacing the false warmth. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing. I'm stating facts. You, Uncle Patrick, and Gareth have been running money through offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. You've created at least 6 shell companies to launder funds and hide assets. You've made illegal campaign contributions totaling over $50,000. And you've forged my signature on documents to make it look like I authorized all of it. This is insane, Gareth said, but his voice shook. You have no proof. I have all the proof. Bank records, transaction logs, the companies you created, the accounts you opened, everything. My father stood, his hands flat on the table. Where did you get this information? I hired investigators. Real ones. Forensic accountants who know how to follow money through corporate structures. You're bluffing, Uncle Patrick said. There's no way you could have accessed those records. I didn't need to access them. You were sloppy. You left trails everywhere. And when I started asking questions, instead of coming clean, you tried to frame me. You forged my signatures. You opened credit cards in my name. You created a plan to make me the scapegoat for your crimes. My father moved around the table toward me, and I saw Agent Martinez's warning in my head, but I held my ground, kept my voice steady. Is that why you sent Nate to spy on me? To build a case that I was mentally unstable, to undermine my credibility before I could expose you. Nate was concerned about you. Nate was on your payroll, trading information about me for an investment in your fraudulent development project. You're paranoid, my father said, but there was something in his eyes now. A recognition that I knew too much to be dismissed. Where are these so-called recordings? This evidence? Safe. Multiple copies. And before you think about another break-in, they're not at my apartment. They're with my attorney and with federal investigators who are very interested in the Thorne family's financial activities. The room erupted. Everyone shouting at once. Accusations flying. My father calling me a traitor. Uncle Patrick threatening lawsuits. Jenna crying that I was destroying the family. In the chaos, Gareth stood abruptly, his face pale. I'm not going down for this, he shouted. The offshore accounts were Charles's idea. He said we needed to protect assets from the banks. Shut up, my father roared, rounding on him. Shut your mouth right now. But Gareth was panicking, words tumbling out. The Cayman accounts, the $7 million that went through them last year. That was all you. Charles, you set up the structure. You told me to process the transfers. $7 million, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the noise. You moved $7 million through offshore accounts. Where did that money come from? The fund, Gareth said. And my father lunged at him, actually grabbed him by the shirt. I said, shut up. Get your hands off him, Uncle Patrick said, moving to intervene. And suddenly the three of them were in a physical confrontation. Years of partnership dissolving into blame and rage. I stood and backed toward the door. I think I've heard enough. You're not going anywhere, my father said, breaking away from Gareth. You think you can come into my house? Record our conversation, and just walk away. I never said I was recording. You're wearing a wire. His certainty was chilling. You came here to entrap us. I came here hoping you'd tell the truth. That you'd take responsibility for what you've done instead of trying to destroy me to cover your crimes. We're family, he said. And there was something desperate in his voice now. Family protects each other. You stole from me. You forged my name. You tried to frame me for your crimes. That's not family. That's not protection. That's betrayal. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice going cold, you're dead to this family. We will destroy you. Your career. Your reputation. Your life. We have lawyers. Connections. Money. You're just one person with some documents. Who do you think people will believe? I looked at him. This man who'd raised me. Who'd taught me to read financial statements and negotiate contracts. Who'd been so proud when I got into Wharton. I looked at him and saw a stranger. A criminal. Someone who'd chosen money over honor. Self-preservation over truth. I believe the FBI will believe me. I said. They're outside right now, listening to every word you've said. And I think they've heard enough. The color drained from his face, The room went absolutely silent. Then pandemonium. People running for doors. Gareth vomiting in the corner. Aunt Carol screaming. My mother collapsing into a chair. Sobbing. I walked out to find Agent Martinez and 4 other agents moving toward the house. Bulletproof vests visible under their jackets. "Good work," she said as we passed. "We got everything we needed." I sat in the FBI van while they executed the arrest warrants. Watched through the window as my father, Uncle, and Gareth were let out in handcuffs. Read their rights. Put in separate vehicles. My father looked for me as they put him in the car. Our eyes met across the driveway. There was no remorse in his expression. Only rage and the cold promise of revenge. The trials took 11 months. Federal prosecutors built a case that went far beyond simple fraud. What started as a family fund embezzlement expanded into a sprawling investigation of money laundering, tax evasion, campaign finance violations, and organized financial crime. The deeper investigators dug, the more they found. Connections to other businesses, other frauds, a pattern of criminal behavior stretching back a decade. My father's attorneys tried every angle. They claimed I was mentally unstable, jealous, vindictive. They produced character witnesses who said I'd always been difficult, always sought attention, always resented my father's success. They argued the signatures were genuine, that I'd authorized the transactions and only claimed forgery after I was caught. But the evidence was overwhelming. Handwriting analysis proved the signatures were forged. Bank records showed I'd been reporting identity theft for months before anyone knew about the fraud. Maitland's forensic accounting demonstrated a sophisticated criminal enterprise. And the recordings from that final family dinner captured my father and Gareth admitting to crimes in their own words. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous on all counts. Guilty. 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 The word repeated 27 times as the foreman read through each charge. Fraud. Money laundering. Tax evasion. Identity theft. Campaign finance violations. Conspiracy. The list went on. My father's sentencing was 3 weeks later. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd built her reputation on putting white-collar criminals behind bars. She listened to the prosecution's recommendations, to the defense's pleas for leniency, to the victims who stood to testify about harm done to them. Then she looked at my father and said, "You were entrusted with a fund meant to help family members in need? Instead, you turned it into a personal piggy bank and a money laundering operation. You stole from your own daughter. You forged her signature. You attempted to frame her for your crimes. You showed no remorse, no accountability, no recognition of the harm you caused. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 17 years in federal prison. Gareth got 12 years. Uncle Patrick got 14. Various other co-conspirators got sentences ranging from probation to 8 years depending on their level of involvement. As they led my father away, he looked back at me, one final time, not with remorse, not with sadness, just with cold, hard anger that said he'd never forgive me, never accept responsibility, never believe he'd done anything wrong. I felt nothing watching him go. No satisfaction, no relief. Just a bone-deep exhaustion that came from fighting so hard for so long. The aftermath was messy in ways I hadn't anticipated. Half the family cut me off completely, believing the narrative that I'd destroyed them out of spite. They organized around my father's victimhood, creating a story where he was the martyr, and I was the villain. Family reunions I wasn't invited to. Holidays celebrated without me. Cousins who'd grown up beside me refusing to speak to me. But the other half, slowly, quietly, reached out. Aunt Nancy first, calling 2 weeks after the sentencing. "I've kept records," she said without preamble. "Every time I noticed something suspicious, I wrote it down. Your father has been running cons since we were teenagers. I'm glad someone finally stopped him." Then Tyler and Amanda, my younger cousins, who'd been pressured to testify against me, but had refused. Uncle Carl tried to get us to say you'd always been jealous, always unstable. Amanda told me over coffee, but we knew it wasn't true. We knew something was wrong with the fund. We just didn't know how to prove it. My sister Jenna took longer. 6 months of silence before she finally called. her voice small. "I'm sorry. I should have believed you. Mom told me everything Dad did. How he manipulated all of us. I was so wrong." Grandmother. Dorothy never wavered. When I went to visit her after the sentencing, she held my hand with her papery grip and said, "Your grandfather would have been proud. It takes courage to do the right thing when everyone tells you you're wrong." But the real surprise came a month after the trials ended, when I received a package at my new apartment. Inside was a thumb drive and a handwritten note in grandmother's shaky script. "I've been recording them for over a year. I knew something was wrong. I couldn't prove it. But I knew. These recordings might help you rebuild what they destroyed." The thumb drive contained dozens of audio files, conversations between my father, Uncle, and Gareth discussing the fraud, planning the cover-up, strategizing how to frame me. Grandmother had been secretly recording family gatherings, business meetings, phone calls, building a case of her own in case she ever needed it. The recordings helped clear my name completely. Westridge Capital not only reinstated me, but promoted me to Director of Compliance, a newly expanded department created in response to what they called regulatory vulnerabilities. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's crimes had advanced my career. I also established the Thorn Restoration Fund, using the money recovered from my father's criminal assets. A real fund this time, properly managed, transparently operated, helping family members who'd been counting on the original fund and found themselves cut off when it collapsed. Grandmother Dorothy was the first trustee. Aunt Nancy was the second. We built something good from the ashes of something corrupt. My mother divorced my father 8 months into his sentence. She came to see me afterwards, looking smaller somehow, worn down by shame and complicity. "I knew," she said. "Maybe not everything, but I knew enough. I should have stopped him. Should have protected you. I'm sorry. We're working on rebuilding that relationship. It's slow. Trust doesn't come easy after betrayal. But she's trying. And that matters." I met Marshall at a conference on financial ethics. Of all places. He was a federal prosecutor specializing in white-collar crime. Brilliant and funny, and completely unimpressed by family names or old money. He knew my story before we spoke. Had actually reviewed some of the Thorn case files as part of his continuing education. "Your family's fraud is going to be a textbook case," he said over drinks after his panel. "Literally. I'm using it in my training seminars." That's disturbing. That's justice. You did something most people don't have the courage to do. You chose truth over family. Even knowing what it would cost you. We started dating 3 months later. Took it slow. I learned the hard way that trust had to be earned. That the people closest to you could hurt you most if you didn't pay attention. But Marshall understood. He'd seen enough betrayal in his work to know that caution wasn't the same as fear. 2 years after that defining text message, I hosted Thanksgiving at my new place. A brownstone in Brooklyn I'd bought with money from my promotion. Grandmother Dorothy had moved into the guest suite, her health improving with better care and less stress. Aunt Nancy brought her famous apple pie. Tyler and Amanda came with their partners. Jenna brought our mother. Madeline came with her girlfriend. Sharon came with her husband. Marshall helped me carve the turkey. We gathered around a table that held no secrets, no even agendas. No calculations about who owed what to whom. Just people who'd chosen to be there, who'd built relationships on honesty instead of obligation. Before we ate, I raised my glass. "To family," I said. "Not the one you're born into, but the one you choose, the one built on truth, respect, and trust. The one that doesn't ask you to sacrifice yourself to protect someone else's lies." 3 years to the day after my father's text message told me to step back, I received a new text. From a group chat containing all the family members who'd stood by me, who'd chosen truth over comfortable lies. "Thank you for having the courage to stand up for what was right. We're better because of you." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I sat on my deck watching the sun set over Brooklyn. Marshall reading beside me, Grandmother Dorothy napping in her chair, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The empire my father built on lies had collapsed. But from those ashes, something more valuable had risen. A community founded on integrity. Relationships based on choice rather than blood. A life built on truth instead of obligation. I'd lost the family I was born into. But I'd found something better. I'd found myself, and I'd found the people who valued truth enough to stand beside me when telling it cost everything. My father's empire of fraud is over. He sits in a federal prison, still believing he did nothing wrong. Still convinced he was the victim of an ungrateful daughter. Maybe he'll never understand what he lost. Maybe he'll never accept responsibility for what he did. But I understand something he never will. That loyalty isn't blind. That family isn't an excuse for crime. That love doesn't mean accepting abuse. And duty doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of someone else's greed. I destroyed my family to save myself. And I'd make the same choice again. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you ever had to walk away from people you love because staying meant betraying yourself? How did you find the courage? And what did it cost you? Drop your story in the comments below. Hit that like button if this resonated with you. Subscribe because I'll be sharing more stories about choosing truth over comfortable lies. About building the life you deserve, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. And remember, the family you choose is just as real as the family you're born into. Sometimes more real. Sometimes the only thing that saves you. Thanks for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there find the courage to stand up for themselves. Even when it feels impossible. Especially when it feels impossible. Because you deserve better than betrayal disguised as loyalty. You deserve a family that respects you. And if you have to build that family yourself, one honest relationship at a time, then that's exactly what you should do.